14 Characteristic of a King, Part 2. 9. A king embodies the government of his kingdom. This means that wherever a king is, his entire government is present. Whenever a king speaks, his whole government is speaking. Whenever a king moves, the government moves with him because he embodies the government. The king is the government. When President Bush travels abroad, the authority of the United States government travels with him because he represents the government and the people. The government itself, however, does not travel with him. It remains in place and is functioning in Washington. On the other hand, the government of a king is located wherever the king is. A king and his government are inseparable. This is how we can know that the kingdom of heaven is on earth. The kingdom is here because the king is here. Jesus said, "If two of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where two or three come together in my name, there am I with them." Matthew 18 verses 19 to 20. And, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely, I am with you always, to the very end of the age. Matthew 28 verses 18 to 20. The kingdom of heaven is here because the King of heaven is here in the hearts and lives of his citizens who populate his colony here. 10. A king's presence is the presence of his authority. When a king shows up, his full authority is present. His authority does not reside in a place or in a document, it resides in him personally. This is why citizens of God's kingdom colony on earth can act with kingly authority. Because the king is present, his authority is also present. It was this present authority that Jesus had in mind when he said, "I tell you the truth, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Matthew 18 verse 18. And, "I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Son may bring glory to the Father. You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it." John 14 verses 13 to 14. Kingdom citizens may always exercise kingly authority because the king is always present with them. 11. A king's wealth is measured by his property. The larger and richer in resources a kingdom is, the wealthier the king is, because the king owns everything in his kingdom. Dictators become wealthy by stealing from the people. Democratically elected leaders may or may not be personally wealthy, but they definitely do not own their country. This is one of the major distinctions between a king and other government leaders. Kings own everything in their domain by right of birth and kingship. As a matter of fact, property is so tied up with a king's identity that without it a king is not a king. We will discuss this more thoroughly in Chapter 6. Why is wealth so important in a kingdom? So the king can take care of his citizens. A righteous and benevolent king does not amass wealth for himself but for the welfare of his citizens. This is why it is only in a kingdom that we truly find commonwealth, that is common to all the people. No kingdom is greater or richer than the kingdom of heaven because it encompasses all that exists. And no king is wealthier than the King of heaven because he owns everything everywhere in both the natural and supernatural realms. Consequently, no citizens of any government are more prosperous or have greater welfare than do citizens of the kingdom of heaven because all the infinite wealth of that kingdom is their common wealth. 12. A king's prosperity is measured by the status of his citizens. If the citizens are poor, the king is seen as a poor king. If the citizens are prosperous, however, the king is seen as a wealthy king. Wealthy citizens make a king proud. That is why it is important for a king to make sure his people prosper. Jesus never preached prosperity. Why not? Because prosperity is a matter of kingdom business. Anyone who becomes a citizen of the kingdom of heaven automatically prospers because the King of heaven is a wealthy king, the wealthiest of all. And he is also a righteous and benevolent king who is committed to the fullest and greatest welfare of his people. 13. A king's name is the essence of his authority. A king can delegate authority to anyone he pleases to act in his name or on his behalf. This is often done by issuing a king's letter, a royal edict signed by the king and bearing his official seal that authorizes the bearer to act on his authority. Anyone to whom the king's letter is presented must treat the bearer as if he were the king himself. Nehemiah, another exiled Jew who was a contemporary of Daniel, was cupbearer to the Persian king Artaxerxes. Hearing that Jerusalem had been destroyed, Nehemiah longed to go there and rebuild the city. When the king learned of Nehemiah's desire, he granted him permission to go. He also issued letters instructing the keeper of the king's forest to give Nehemiah all the material he required and for the governors of the various provinces to grant him safe passage. Nehemiah carried the king's name and, therefore, his authority, see Nehemiah chapters 1-2. Citizens of the kingdom of heaven have the same privilege. Jesus the King has issued king's letters to all his people, delegating his authority to them. That is why the New Testament says that kingdom citizens are to pray in the name of Jesus. It is why he promised to do anything that they asked for in his name. There is nothing religious or mysterious about this. It is simply a kingdom principle at work. The king's name carries the same authority as the king himself, and all who carry his name can operate under his authority. 14. A king's citizenry represents his glory. Any conscientious king wants his citizens to be happy, prosperous, and content because their status and quality of life reflect on him. The greater their prosperity and well-being, the greater the glory and honor that rest on the king who provides for them so well. Citizens of God's kingdom are supposed to show what their king is like by the way they live, act, dress, walk, and talk. Kingdom citizens are to reflect the nature and character of their king, who is righteous, just, benevolent, compassionate, and full of glory. This is why there is no poverty, no economic crisis, and no shortages in the kingdom of heaven. As King David observed, the Lord upholds the righteous. I was young and now I am old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging bread. Psalm 37:17b, 25. The King of Heaven takes care of his citizens. Appropriating the riches of the kingdom of heaven means first of all understanding that the king owns everything and we own nothing, and second, that he can give whatever he wants to anyone he wants whenever he wants. This is the kingdom concept of lordship and is the subject of the next chapter. Principles. 1. A kingdom is the sovereign rulership and governing influence of a king over his territory, impacting it with his will, his intent, and his purpose. 2. In the fullness of time, Jesus came to the earth and re-established the kingdom. Because only a king can establish a kingdom, this act alone reveals that Jesus Christ is the King. 3. Jesus said that his kingdom was not of this world. He never said that it was not in this world. 4. Inside each of us is a latent kingdom of consciousness striving for expression. 5. We all seek power over things and circumstances, and that is what the kingdom of heaven promises. 6. A king is the central component of his kingdom. 7. A king is the ultimate and only source of authority in his kingdom. 8. The sovereignty of a king is inherent in his royal authority. 9. God's sovereignty is absolute. He is completely self-determining.